The city of Kiamvu was alive, its streets bustling with energy at all hours. From the glittering towers of Kengezi to the chaotic labyrinth of the Makoma slums, the city was a melting pot of ambition, despair, and secrets. It was a place where survival often depended on who you knew or how far you were willing to go to bend the rules. In the heart of this metropolis stood Hartwell Medical Center, a modest building dwarfed by the skyscrapers around it. Yet, it commanded a unique kind of respect. This was not because of its state-of-the-art facilities or its pristine reputation, but because of the man who ran it, Dr. Malu Dogo. Dr. Malu was a legend in Kiamvu. Born in the Makoma slums, he had risen above the poverty and despair that defined his childhood. Through sheer determination and an uncanny brilliance, he had secured a scholarship to study medicine abroad. When he returned, he was hailed as a hero, a symbol of hope for the downtrodden. The doctor's reputation was built on stories that bordered on the miraculous. People claimed he could heal even the most hopeless cases. Patients who had been written off by other hospitals found themselves walking out of Hartwell, their ailments gone as if by magic. "He's a gift from God," whispered Mama Chipo, a fruit vendor who had recovered from an aggressive tumor under Malu's care. "There's no other explanation." But not everyone in Kiamvu was so enamored. Among the city's skeptics were whispers of unease, rumors of strange occurrences at the clinic during the dead of night. Yet, these murmurs were drowned out by the louder chorus of gratitude and admiration. For years, Dr. Malu basked in the adulation of the city. But as his fame grew, so did the darkness within him. It began subtly, almost innocently. One night, a young woman named Amina was brought into the clinic. She was barely breathing, her body ravaged by a mysterious illness that no other doctor could diagnose. Her family, desperate for a miracle, begged Dr. Malu to save her. As he examined her, a strange sensation overcame him. He felt drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. Her pulse, faint and erratic, seemed to echo in his ears, growing louder until it was all he could hear. Then, a voice, soft but insistent, whispered in his mind, "Take her essence. Save her." Dr. Malu recoiled, shaking his head, but the voice persisted, promising him the power to heal, the power to be more than just a man. In that moment of weakness, he succumbed. He prepared a syringe, not to administer medicine but to extract blood from her veins. As the crimson liquid filled the syringe, the sensation grew stronger. His hands trembled as he brought it to his lips. The first drop was electric, a surge of vitality and clarity like nothing he had ever experienced. When it was over, Amina stirred. Her breathing steadied, her fever broke, and she opened her eyes. "It's a miracle!" her mother cried, falling to her knees. But Dr. Malu knew it was no miracle. It was something else entirely. Haunted by what he had done, Dr. Malu sought answers. He traveled to the outskirts of Kiamvu, to a remote village where his ancestors had lived. There, he met a mysterious elder named Mazika Hindo, a man rumored to possess knowledge of ancient rituals and forbidden practices. Mazika Hindo listened in silence as Malu recounted the strange events at his clinic. When the doctor finished, the elder nodded gravely. "You have stumbled upon the Blood Pact," Kahindo said, "an ancient power that can heal and destroy in equal measure. It is not a gift, it is a curse." The elder explained the origins of the pact, a ritual performed by desperate healers in times of great plague. By consuming the blood of the sick, they could transfer vitality to themselves and their patients. But the power came at a price, an insatiable hunger for blood and a slow erosion of the soul. "You must resist it," Kahindo warned, "or it will consume you." But Malu, intoxicated by the memory of the power he had felt, left the village with more questions than answers. Dr. Malu's practice flourished in the months that followed. The rumors of his miraculous abilities spread far and wide, drawing patients from every corner of the city. He worked tirelessly, often through the night, treating cases that other doctors had deemed hopeless. But his success came at a cost. The more he used the Blood Pact, the more it demanded of him. Ordinary blood no longer satisfied the hunger. He needed the essence of those closest to death, their vitality ripe for the taking. His appearance began to change. His skin grew unnaturally smooth, his eyes sharper and more penetrating. People remarked on how young he looked, how vibrant, as if time itself had no hold on him. But there were other changes too. He grew distant, his once warm demeanor replaced by a cold, calculating edge. The nurses at Hartwell noticed his growing impatience, his irritability when patients didn't respond to treatment as quickly as he wanted. And then there were the disappearances. Juma, the night watchman at Hartwell, was the first to notice the pattern. Patients who came to the clinic after hours often didn't leave. When he asked the nurses about it, they shrugged it off. They're probably transferred to another hospital, one said. But Juma wasn't convinced. He had seen the look in Dr. Malu's eyes as he wheeled a gurney into the basement late one night, a look that sent shivers down his spine. Determined to uncover the truth, Juma began keeping a journal, documenting everything he saw. He noted the strange deliveries that arrived at odd hours, the locked doors in the basement, the muffled sounds that emanated from behind them. One night he decided to investigate. Juma had always prided himself on his courage. Growing up in the slums of Makoma, survival demanded quick thinking and a fearless spirit. But as he descended into the dimly lit basement of Hartwell Medical Center, even he felt the icy grip of fear. The basement was a maze of corridors lined with locked doors. At the far end was the room he had been observing for weeks, the source of the muffled noises that disturbed his nights. He moved cautiously, his flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. When he reached the door, he crouched low and pressed his ear against it. At first, all he could hear was the faint hum of a machine, but then came the voices. One was unmistakably Dr. Malu's, calm, authoritative, and oddly serene. The other was weaker, a patient perhaps, murmuring in pain or confusion. Juma's heart pounded as he adjusted the flashlight and peeked through the keyhole. What he saw would haunt him forever. Inside, Dr. Malu stood over a young man strapped to a gurney. The patient's face was pale, his body limp as Malu extracted blood into a large syringe. But what happened next made Juma gasp audibly. Malu raised the syringe to his lips and drank its contents, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light as he did so. Juma stumbled back, his breathing ragged. The flashlight slipped from his grip, clattering against the floor. He cursed under his breath and scrambled to retrieve it, but it was too late. The door creaked open. "Juma," Malu said, his voice calm but laced with menace. "What are you doing here?" Juma's mind raced, searching for an excuse. I heard a noise, thought it might be rats." Malu smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "This area is off limits. Go back to your station. And Juma, curiosity can be dangerous." The watchman nodded hurriedly and fled, vowing to expose the doctor's sinister activities. Juma's story reached Nia Mbatha, a journalist renowned for her exposés on corruption and injustice in Kiamvu. Her articles had brought down crooked politicians and exposed corporate exploitation, but this was unlike anything she had encountered before. When Juma approached her with his tale, Nia was skeptical. "A doctor drinking the blood of his patients? Do you know how absurd that sounds?" Juma's desperation was evident. "I know what I saw. People are disappearing, and he's behind it. Please, just look into it." Reluctantly, Nia agreed. She began by interviewing former patients of Dr. Malu, those who had experienced his so-called miracles. Their stories were eerily consistent: sudden, inexplicable recoveries, followed by lingering feelings of exhaustion and, in some cases, strange dreams of being drained or pursued. The deeper Nia dug, the more convinced she became that something sinister was happening at Hartwell. Her investigation led her to Zawadi, the wife of Fundi, one of Malu's earlier patients. "My husband hasn't been the same since his treatment," Zawadi confided. It's like he left something behind at that clinic, something vital. Nia knew she was onto something big. Nia's investigation uncovered a disturbing pattern. A growing number of patients listed as discharged from Hartwell but never seen again. When she checked their addresses, she found empty homes or families claiming they hadn't seen their loved ones in weeks. The journalist began piecing together a timeline of the disappearances. The cases became more frequent as Dr. Malu's reputation grew. It was as if his success was built on the vanishing lives of others. Her instincts told her that she needed hard evidence. She decided to infiltrate the clinic herself, posing as a patient. Nia arrived at Hartwell under the guise of a patient suffering from chronic migraines. She filled out the paperwork, her hidden camera tucked into the folds of her scarf. When she was called into Dr. Malu's office, she felt a chill run down her spine. The doctor was as charming as ever, his demeanor calm and professional. But as he examined her, she noticed the way his eyes lingered on her veins, the almost predatory gleam in his gaze. "You'll need a blood test," he said, his tone casual. Nia nodded, her heart pounding. She watched as he prepared the syringe, his movements precise and deliberate. But instead of disposing of the vial after drawing her blood, he placed it carefully into a refrigerated compartment. "Is that for testing?" she asked, feigning ignorance. "Of course," Malu replied with a smile. But Nia wasn't convinced. Nia returned to her office to review the footage. What she saw confirmed her suspicions. The clinic was not a place of healing, but a hunting ground for Dr. Malu's sinister appetites. She compiled her findings into a detailed report, complete with testimonies from patients, Juma's account, and the footage from her hidden camera. The article, titled "The Blood Doctor, The Dark Secret of Kiamvu's Miracle Healer," was ready to publish. But before she could release it, she received a call. "Miss Mbatha." Malu's voice was calm, almost amused. "I know what you're doing. I suggest you stop, for your own safety." Nia hung up, her resolve hardening. She wouldn't be intimidated. Determined to expose Malu, Nia, Juma, and Zawadi devised a plan to confront him directly. They gathered a small group of trusted allies, including a retired detective named Kamau, who had long suspected Malu of foul play. Late one night, they broke into the clinic, armed with cameras, flashlights, and determination. The basement was as eerie as Juma had described. They found rows of vials filled with blood, each labeled with a patient's name. At the center of the room was an altar adorned with strange symbols. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and Malu appeared, his figure casting a long shadow across the room. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice cold. "You don't understand the power I wield." A tense confrontation ensued. Malu revealed the full extent of his pact, his voice tinged with both pride and bitterness. "I have saved hundreds, thousands, but the price of salvation is always high." Nia stepped forward, her voice steady. "You're not saving anyone. You're feeding on them." The group confronted Malu, who unleashed the full force of his unnatural strength. The basement became a battlefield, the air thick with tension and fear. Juma and Kamau fought bravely, using improvised weapons to keep Malu at bay, while Nia and Zawadi worked to destroy the blood vials. As the altar was overturned, Malu let out a guttural scream, his body convulsing as the power of the Blood Pact began to unravel. "You don't understand," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Without me, they'll die." But it was too late. The ritual was broken, and Malu collapsed, his body withering into a husk before their eyes. The story of Dr. Malu shook Kiamvu to its core. Hartwell Medical Center was shut down, and the victims' families demanded justice. Nia's exposé won her international acclaim, but the experience left her deeply scarred. She vowed to continue her fight against corruption, no matter the cost. As for Juma and Zawadi, they returned to their lives, grateful to have survived. But in the shadows of Kiamvu, whispers persisted. Some claimed to have seen Malu's ghost, wandering the city in search of new victims. And so, The tale of the Blood Pact became a dark chapter in Kiamvu's history, a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition.